Hello amigos, I'm back on YouTube after a little break. Well, I've been photographing cormorants here in the city in one of the parks that has a number of man-made lagoons. And I've been able to get quite a few different behaviors. Sometimes I'm able to capture singles or groups of birds on the branches around the lagoon. Other times I can capture them flying, landing on the water, or even having this heated political conversation after the elections. But one of my best images, or my favorite images, is this other one, donde I was able to catch a behavior I hadn't seen before, which was this cormorant taking a bath in the water. Basically, this bird was just slapping his wings back and forth on the water while he was turning. And I was able to take a number of sequences. So once I got home, I came into Lightroom and I started looking to see if I could have a frame that I felt represented the behavior, that had a good pose, and it was a good candidate for editing. All these images, of course, taken in RAW format. And here we see the bird. I'm gonna make it a little bigger, slapping the water, raising the wings, and getting ready to slap the water one more time. And the frame that I selected was this one. When I evaluate the frame, I like the pose of the bird with the wings extended, and I like all the water around the bird. The image is well exposed. If we look at the histogram, we can see I'm barely touching the blacks and the whites. It was taken at ISO 800. So ISO 800 has very little noise. But I know I'm gonna crank up the exposure on the bird, open up the shadows, and that's gonna bring some of the noise on the bird, even though it's at ISO 800. We have a very good choice now in Lightroom. It's been there now for a year and a half or so. The option to use artificial intelligence to remove noise, and also adds additional sharpness. We also have plugins, my favorite being DxO Pure Raw 4, also Photo AI, that do a great job in removing noise from RAW files. But for the edit today, we're gonna stay within Lightroom. So what I'm going to do first is take the frame that I like. This is taken with the OM Systems OM2 camera at 840 millimeters equivalent. I'm going to go to the develop module, and under noise reduction we have denoise. We just click there, and of course this is only going to work on RAW files. It doesn't work for JPEG, or at least not yet. It opens up the interface. Adobe could improve on the interface. I think the window it gives us to preview is way too small. An amount of 50 I think does okay for this one. You can click and release and see what it does. I'm gonna click enhance, and now it's gonna take a few seconds depending on how powerful our computer is or how powerful the graphics card is. And in this case, it's probably gonna take about 10 seconds. Well, it created the image. It created a DNG that is completely free of noise, and it gave us a little bit more detail on the bird. I always start by thinking what is going to be my plan of attack. And for this image, of course, I told you I like the pose of the bird with the wings extended, so I'm going to focus on that. I want to capture a little bit of the water and a little bit of the scenery behind the bird. So I'm going to have to crop it and to basically focus our attention on the bird, because we have a lot of area that we don't need. Next, we want to enhance the bird. We want to recover detail from the dark feathers and make the bird pop, and also the water that is there. So we're gonna go to crop. I think I'm gonna change the aspect ratio. I click and I'm gonna go to 16:9, similar to the modern TVs that we have. 16:9 is a good panoramic view that is going to allow us to focus the attention on the bird with the wings extended and not having to have the distraction, a lot of stuff around the bird. And I'm putting the bird kind of on the bottom half of the image, something like that. Now with the letter L, we can dim the lights in Lightroom. One more time, it completely turns off the lights of all the menus. I think it helps us evaluate the crop and the composition better. I think I'm gonna rotate it a bit. We press L one more time. It brings the lights back on, and I'm gonna close the crop area. And now we basically have a very good composition in my view. I'm going to do some global edits. And for the global edits, I'm gonna bring the exposure a touch. I'm gonna increase contrast a bit. I'm gonna remove the highlights. I want to recover the detail on the water. I'm gonna open the shadows a bit, reduce the whites, and I'm gonna open the blacks a little bit more. So just those changes, global, we were there before and we're there now. Very little subtle changes. One beauty of Lightroom is we have mask, and we can do a lot of local edits to work different parts of the image. So I'm gonna go to mask. I'm going to select subject. And it did a good selection. It selected the bird, but it also selected a few other areas that we don't want. Under the mask, we go to subtract. I'm gonna subtract with the brush. I can change the size of the brush with the wheel on my mouse. And I'm gonna erase the areas that I don't need quickly. As I get close to the bird, I can make my brush smaller. I can turn the visualization on or off. That helps me view how close I'm getting to the bird. And basically, I think here I have a good mask to do my edits. What do I want to do with this mask? Well, I'm going to bring up the exposure. I want to open up the bird. So I did up something like 0.7, 0.8. I'm going to lower the highlights a touch. Sometimes we have to play with the slider up and down to see what looks better. I'm going to open up the shadows quite a bit. I'm going to play with the whites. That's too much. I think I'm reducing it a touch. And on the blacks, if I open the blacks, I completely lose contrast on the bird. So I'm going to bring the blacks, I think just a touch. Now under effects, I'm going to increase the texture. That's going to make the detail on the fine feathers pop. And I'm going to add a touch of clarity. That clarity is going to make the bird more contrast, because clarity adds quite a bit of contrast to the midtones. So like the edge of the wings, getting more detail, and the head. So just with this mask, if I turn it off, that was before, and this is now. We can see we're making the bird pop and the water that was around the bird. Next thing I want to do is I want to get more attention to the head. So for that, I'm gonna create a radial gradient and put it, shape it right around the head. And what I'm going to do on the head is get the exposure a bit more, open the shadows a bit more, lower highlights, and let's see, play with the whites, with the blacks, reduce it a bit, and the whites, open the whites up, it gets more attention on the beak. So if I turn it off, that was before, and this is now. Subtle changes just to get our attention towards the head. Remember, it's light, color, and detail that attracts our eyes. Talking of eyes, you know, one of the attractive things about this bird is the eye, the unique color of the eye. And for this type of cormorant, the color has that kind of turquoise color. I'm gonna make the bird 100% on size. I'm gonna add another mask with the radial gradient, and I'm going to make a very small gradient right over the eye. And I'm going to increase the exposure. I like to do that with people and with animals, is increase the exposure, lower the blacks a touch, because we still have the pupil that we need to retain contrast on the pupil. I'm going under color, increase the saturation, because when we increase exposure, the color gets less saturated. So I'm going to increase the saturation. And another thing that we can do to get detail on the eye is to increase clarity. I know it's a very small portion of the image, but I think if we display it large, like on the large screen TV, it's going to make the eye really become more visible. This is before and this is after. A couple of things I want to do now on the rest of the image. One is the color of the water looks kind of boring. So I'm going to create a new mask with the linear gradient, and I'm going to put it right here. And what I'm going to do under color, actually first on tone, I'm going to reduce the exposure a touch, but I'm going to open the highlights a little bit. And then on color, I'm going to increase, make it warmer, but also under tint, I'm going to make it a little more green. And that's the effect on the water. It looks like it's reflecting the yellow from the back. Talking of the yellow, it's a little too bright and too saturated for me. My eyes are going to the background right away. So I want to tone it down. So what I'm going to do in the beauty of Lightroom is that we have many different choices for creating masks. And one of them is color range. And we can click on an individual area, a single pixel actually, or we can draw a little square. It's going to try to average that color. And it did a very nice job of selecting the areas that had the yellow. We even can come here on the upper right and refine it and adjust the range of tones, in this case that orangey yellow that got selected. And what I want to do is I'm going to reduce the exposure a touch, and under color I want to reduce the saturation. I don't want to make it gray, I still want it a touch of orange, but just not as attention grabbing as we had before. So if I turn it down, that was before and this is now. Perhaps the tone needs to come up a bit. We still want it to look natural. So with the mask that we have created, this is before all the masks, and now by manipulating the light, this is where the group of masks. Finally, I want to get the attention to the bottom half of the image where we had the bird. We can use the vignette option in Lightroom, but that's going to darken from all the edges evenly, and I don't want that. What I want to do is increase luminance or exposure in the area that is important to me and reduce it outside there. So we're going to do what I like to call the double vignette. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new mask with the radial. I'm going to create it elongated right around the bird. And on this first mask, I'm going to increase the exposure just a touch, something like 0.3. And I'm going to lower the shadows because I don't want to lose contrast too much by increasing the exposure. I'm going to reduce the shadows a touch, something like -10, -12 points. But to contrast that, what I'm going to do is create the opposite effect in the rest of the image. And the easiest way to do that is on the mask I had already created, is I click on the 3 circles and I do duplicate and invert. And now I selected the other areas. What I want to do there is the opposite. I'm going to reduce exposure about a third, and I'm gonna increase the highlights a touch, something like 12 points or so. So now if I close all the masks, that was before the mask, and that's with all the masks. I think we're really making the subject pop. We added detail to the bird. We open up the shadows without going overboard. We're really capturing this behavior of the bird slapping the water. And I think it's looking very nice. We're going to close the mask. I think I'm going to reduce the whites a little more and the highlights. It's good to come back after all the mask and see what other global edits we need to do. And the final thing is we're going to do some detail. And we're going to blow it to 100%. In sharpening, I'm increasing the sharpening, I don't know, something like 50. I'm going to create a mask. I hold the Alt key and move it to the right, and only the white areas are getting sharpened. And if I make it big, now that's our final image. I think we really were able to get out the potential of the original RAW file. And one of the beauties in shooting in RAW is that we have a lot of information. A lot of information even on the dark areas. And we process that RAW file with the AI denoise in Lightroom, or one of the plugins that I mentioned, the XO Pure RAW 4 or Topaz Denoise. We can really bring up the exposure, open up the shadows, and not have any or very little noise in those areas. And I really like this image with the bird and all the action of the bird kind of slapping on the water. Well, amigos, I hope you like this edit of this cormorant taking a bath. Don't forget to send me your comments. Let me know what type of videos you would like to see on future videos that I make. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, help me grow the channel, and I'll see you next time.